Hi. In view of the things that are happening in the world, both mine and I think the world outside, I wanted to make a video where I will talk about some of the fundamental beliefs that my personal faith is based in. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I see a lot of people coming to faith, and I've met a lot of people who are struggling to find a community. They're struggling to connect with other believers in a way that is healthy and in a way that aligns with their faith and their personal relationship with God. Usually because every religion, every church will follow a particular doctrine, and they're very conscientious about that. And sometimes that might not really work for some people. So I'm just going to talk about things that I found to be true throughout my personal story and in my relationship with God, and also things that I confirmed in the Bible. So things I'm going to talk about align with what is written in the Bible, although they might not necessarily be the things that other religions will preach and believe in. However, for that reason, I do provide scriptural support, if you will. Okay, so first I want to talk about this world, because that's I feel like wasn't addressed enough. The current condition of the world that we live in. So while we can read the Bible and while we can see things that are both related to what is happening today and things of the past, a lot of the time people will focus on the historical events that are described in the Bible. And while that can have some value, I think it's very important for us today to sort of understand where we are. That sounds reasonable. Yeah. So this world, when I go outside and when I look at this world, I feel disturbed. I feel disturbed. I cannot say how things were 100 years ago or 500 years ago, but I can say that right now I am less than satisfied with what I see, and a lot of the time I feel very lonely and disconnected from the world and disconnected from other people. And it's been also my observation that it keeps progressing and people keep disconnecting more and more from the truth and from having genuine relationships with one another. So since we still don't live under the governance of God on earth, where every single person obeys God, since that's still not our reality, I think if you are a believer in these trying times, I think if you're one of these people who is aware, who is conscious, who still has faith, I think it's very important to, if not talk about this, but at least stay aware of it, just so that you can stay awake. That's one thing. And another thing, so that you can help others. Because the expectation should be that most people are not conscious of things that are happening around them. They're not conscious, they're not making the best decisions. More than likely, they're following something that leads to destruction. So that would be the expectation, that would be the norm. Anything other than that would be an exception. So if you are one of these people, please join me. Okay, that's the message that I wanted to go to the next thing. Sin and misery. So that's in connection to this world. This is how I describe this world, sin and misery. And while sin, you probably already heard enough about sin. And maybe you already heard and experienced misery. The one thing about misery that I think is interesting is that regardless of whether you are a believer or you still live in sin and in the darkness of sin as a slave of sin, regardless of that, you still experience misery. And the misery of a believer is different. Like when I was talking about myself, I was mentioning feeling lonely and disconnected. Also, on top of that, we can also be misjudged and misunderstood, harassed. All the things that are pretty normal experience of a believing person, things that we sign up for. So either way, we have sin and misery. Okay, so I have a verse that goes along with the misery of the corrupt and sinful world of living in such a world. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. And it does make sense, because why would we love the world if the world is based in sin? If it was built by the people in sin, designed by the people in sin, and then further developed into a more corrupt world. And we know that that's true from, well, we just know that that's true from going outside, right? But also in the book of Revelation, we see that things are not going to get better. Not until there comes the end. So at no point will the things just get better. At no point will there be some kind of slow transition into a better working society. And that was never the intention of Jesus. Never. So if that is what you're focused on, I can see, well, I've done the same thing myself. We want what is good, but we forget that we don't get to decide what is good, and that we, a lot of the time, just don't know. We don't know what God knows, usually. So that's one reason not to love the world, because we know that it's going to be destroyed. That's another thing. It's not going to last. So why attach to something that isn't going to last unless you want to go down with it? Okay. So, yeah. Next thing. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. Jesus. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. And that's the misery of a believing person. Something that we should expect, and something that we should know very well. The negative treatment that we receive just because we are who we are. Usually there doesn't need to be any special reason. Sometimes just being in the presence of someone is enough to upset them. Because by being an example of something different, you bring them to a higher awareness of them not being like you. And so they kind of need to do something with that. Because why are you different? Do you think that you're better? Do you think that I'm a bad person? So it might be very interesting how a person might even say those things out loud, while the entire time you were silent. And it does happen. going against the stream of society, not conforming it to its laws and expectations, can be very upsetting. Sometimes people fear what they don't know, and sometimes they respond with aggression. Sometimes they might even recognize you for who you are, and they hate you for exactly that reason. Jesus talked about this as well. In fact, the people who don't make it in the end, that is the reason why they don't make it in the end. Because they prove with their behavior, with their attitude, that they hate Jesus and they hate God. It's not that they misunderstood something. It's not even ignorance. It's not innocent ignorance. But genuine hatred for love and truth and mercy of God. That's pretty scary. And those people. Oh, how to become free? That's in relation to sin and misery. How do we become free? Yeah, that seems like a natural question to ask. Well, here's what Jesus said. He said, for people, this is impossible. For people, this is impossible. And I think now would be a good time to pause and just take it in. For people, this is impossible. But for God, all things are possible. So with God, all things are possible. So we can do it. Almost scared me. Okay. So with God, all things are possible. There's more that you can read about this in the Bible. Of course, there's more than enough. But essentially, it does come down to being reborn or being born again. As Jesus said, being born of water and spirit. And that requires a transformation. And transformation into a new life is something that we probably, I think many people probably heard about, being referred to as ego death. It's actually, although the term, I believe it came from psychoanalysis or psychiatry, I believe, it actually refers to something that has already been described thousands of years ago, and that is dying to sin, dying to flesh. You will see when flesh is being described, like the attributes of flesh, you will see that those are the exact same things that we normally associate with ego. So there's that. Another verse that goes along with that is, sorry, I forgot to move, but it says, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. So I think that that's amazing, because if we put to death the deeds of the body by the Spirit, so that proves to us that we can put to death everything that is sinful and everything that is corrupt within us. We can put those things to death without having to physically die. So it is a spiritual rebirth. And I think that's pretty cool that we have the option to do that while we're still alive. Maybe only while we are alive. And we can do that with help of nothing else but the Spirit. And I also put a little comparison between things that I associate with the flesh and the Spirit. And this is based on my observations Also, I try to put the things that I find the most relevant in our society today. Our society today suffers from the most. And the first is selfish ambition, and that's in the flesh category, of course. And I guess an example of that would be something along the lines of, I love my career. I'm obsessed with my career. I'm obsessed with developing further in my career. I love making money, and I love that I'm seeing myself grow and progress, which makes me feel important, and it makes me feel strong, and it makes me feel very good about myself. I feel like I have a great reputation in the society, and I've earned it. I also want to go to school and get another degree and become a master of something else, so that I can make even more money and become even more successful. You get the idea. Social validation. Well, I guess you can see that in the selfish, it's as a part of selfish ambition. And I guess one variation of that is social validation, and I see that one a lot. Maybe that has something to do with social media. We don't know. Don't know for sure, unless we do. But yes, something along the lines of, I want people to see me as attractive, or I want people to see me as knowledgeable and intelligent. I've suffered from that one. I will admit. Yes, I want to be popular. I want to be wanted. I want to be desired. I want people to say good things about me. I want people to compliment me. I want to know that I am not falling behind. I am keeping up with the trends. And all of that. All of that. So it's not so much your inner value of yourself as a human, and it's not the validation of God. What I mean by validation of God, well, that could be personal, that could be anything, but you know that you're valued by God because God loves you, and God doesn't love you for any of your works, for anything that you earned, for any of your accomplishments. And there are many things that we can do that would benefit the works of God in the long run, and we can invest in those things, but that requires a personal relationship with God. And that is something that opposes flesh, because with flesh we can have memory learning. That's one of the things, the last thing that I put here. We can learn some guidelines, we can learn other people's stories, we can learn terms and descriptions, but to have something that is alive and dynamic and personal, like a personal relationship with God, that would have to be through the Spirit, and that involves dying to flesh. Okay, so I mentioned memory learning, and another place where we see that manifest, actually in school, we learn memory learning in school. We memorize things. We don't necessarily let those things transform us. We just keep that in our memory, like a computer saves things on a flash drive. But to know why we learn this, to know when to apply that knowledge and how to apply it, we need something more. To understand the context of interactions, to know when is the right time to say something or to do something, and when it's best not to. That requires the truth. And the truth, again, is something that opposes flesh. another thing is corruption of the heart. And what I meant by that is our desires that come from the flesh. And the more we act on those desires, the more we invest in that, the more we nurture that seed of corruption, the more corrupt we become, the more we desire those things. Like, I started this job and it was all about money. I didn't necessarily want to do this work, but you have to do it. You have to pay bills. And after a couple of years, I started enjoying making money. It became the only reason why I wake up in the morning. It's the first thing that I think about in order to find motivation to get up and go to work. And now I have a dream, and my new dream is finding another job where I will make even more money, and so on and so forth. It's kind of like building up tolerance for corruption and then needing more corruption. And that doesn't sound good, but that's what I meant. So, spirit. And this is something that is much more difficult to describe or explain or give an example of, but not impossible. So, spiritual insight. Connection to God. Again, connection to God through the Spirit. Revelation of the truth and guidance. So, revelation of the truth. How is that different from spiritual insight? So when I think about spiritual insight, I think about things that are relevant in the present moment and relevant to me personally. So I can have insight of my own behavior, of my own thought, of my own intentions. And when I think about, how I feel about something, what I think, and when I think about revelation of the truth, what I was referring to is something that is outside of me. Usually it could actually be about me, but it usually involves someone else or something that might happen, will happen in the future time. So not so much here in the moment, but about something else, either a person or an event. Guidance. Comparing memory learning to guidance of the spirit. Like I was saying, with memory learning, you don't necessarily receive guidance on how to apply this and when and where. And the spirit can understand all the nuances of human dynamics and life. But when it comes to memorization, it doesn't take that into an account. Therefore, it cannot really be relied on. Sometimes it might work in certain contexts, but most of the time it's not sufficient. And for God, it definitely, how will God know you if you just memorize the things about you but never had a relationship? That's what makes sense to me. Okay. So, His word is the Spirit. It's very unfortunate that I don't think you can see that. I don't think that you can see. Oh, I didn't make it better. Yes, okay. Well, anyways, I don't think that you can see the image, but I just wanted you to see the bee. It's a very cute bee. So, here's another verse that goes with that. It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is of no help. The words I speak to you are spirit and life. Unlike the things that we learn with our mind, his words are eternal. So with the things that we learn with our mind, the things that we memorize, when our body goes, when our brain goes, all those things disappear. They were just temporary. They served us while we were still on earth, and now that our physical body is gone, our flesh is gone, they no longer serve us. There is no life in them. There is no truth in them. There is nothing to last. It served us while we were here on earth, and even that is questionable. But his words are eternal. His words are spirit. I think that that's beautiful. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. And you can hear a promise in those words. Promise that you can rely on, something to look forward to and something to hope for. And also here you know what to invest in. His words, being the spirit, are alive because Jesus is life. And they're revealed to us by the Spirit, which only makes sense. How would something spiritual be revealed to us through any other means other than the Spirit? How else? So here is what Jesus said in relation to the Spirit, which was to come to his disciples after his passing. So he was acknowledging, you probably know this if you're watching this video, but yeah, he was acknowledging that although he's leaving, he's not leaving his disciples alone. He's leaving them with the Spirit. And I am more than sure that that is enough. That whatever Jesus did for his people was more than sufficient. So, because I believe his words and because I believe that they can be relied on, I trust the Spirit. Because the Spirit comes from him. And he inherited the Spirit from God. So, as far as we know, it is the only way we can connect to God. So, here's what he said. But the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you. So, not only does the Spirit guide us in all truth, it also reminds us of what's been said before. And I think that that's great. I didn't have that when I was at school. I couldn't remember anything. And that's again the difference between the Spirit and, well, I mean, you cannot compare, but when it comes to personal experience, how we can see the two manifest, we see that with memory learning, you sort of really need to memorize something. You have to read it 100 times, maybe repeat it out loud, maybe practice before the mirror, maybe record yourself, and then test yourself, and blah, blah, blah. You can see that God doesn't torture us in this way, and I find that beautiful personally. I greatly appreciate that. Love never ends. This is another verse. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. So I think that if all of us focused on what is written here, think that that would disqualify the majority of religions, if not all of them. It would disqualify and denounce and discredit many religions. They would have nothing to base their religion on. Just think about it. Prophecies, they will come to an end. Tongues, they will cease. Knowledge, it will come to an end. So why do I say these things? I do get a little angry. I do. But why do I say these things? Mostly so that the things that have happened to me don't affect other people as much. Hopefully they don't happen to other people. That's the hope. Because as I was saying in the beginning, it's very hard not to have a community of believers with whom you can connect and practice your faith, your personal, intimate faith, your relationship with God together. You know, we can share space because we don't need to waste time on arguing who's right or who's wrong and who's going to be saved and who's not going to be saved and who's going to go to hell and who's going to go to heaven and who's doing things the right way and who's doing things the wrong way. And we can simply respect each other's privacy and the intimate nature of the personal relationship with God and the personal nature of the personal relationship, and not having such community that you can connect on in a non-judgmental way poses a great risk for a believing person to get involved with a religious church. And as though that wasn't bad enough, that church might follow a certain guideline or a doctrine that might not align with genuine faith. That's a problem because now, instead of living by the Spirit and following the path that God put you on, you start learning things with your mind. You start following a doctrine. And that can be very destructive. So that's why it helps sometimes to go and read the Bible yourself with a fresh mind and see what is written there, because I do strongly believe that God knew that that is what is going to happen, that that is going to be a problem for people. Now, the things that are written in the Bible meant to benefit some people more than others. So finding those things for yourself, not listening to any interpretations, can be helpful. God's people have the spirit of the truth. God's people have His Spirit. Whoever doesn't have the Spirit of Christ is not of Christ. Having the Spirit doesn't automatically mean that you always listen to the Spirit. Doesn't mean that you recognize the Spirit. Doesn't mean that you are friends with the Spirit. That you know how to work with the Spirit. That you know of all ways that the Spirit manifests. But we do know that it's in you, or not. We also know that the Spirit cannot be earned, cannot be bought, cannot be earned with any works. and we cannot lose it. And I have another verse that goes with that. Again, words of Jesus. What he said is, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." Yep. So this is everything that I wanted to talk about, everything that I wanted to share. I hope my message finds you well. I hope you have enough faith and hope to get you through, because I think you will need it. I think we will need it. Okay, be well. Till next time. Cute.